Okay, top 5 best and worst games of the year, and a little added bonus in the middle. Let's get into it. Oh, and fuck you, Game Awards. DLC does not count. As much as I love Shadow of the Erdtree, it is not going to be anywhere on this list. All right, before we get started, I'm going to be putting this symbol next to games that I got the platinum on, and this symbol next to games that I did not, just to give a better idea of how invested I was in the game. I won't go for a platinum if it seems like it's too much effort, but generally I do like to get them and will try to. So that'll give you an idea of how much I enjoyed it or how willing I was to keep playing it. We're going to start out with the best games of the year, and I'm going to start by mentioning a couple games that didn't quite make my list, but I think deserve to be mentioned. So these two games that didn't quite make the list are going to be Dragonball Sparking Zero and Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Dragonball Sparking Zero is an arena fighter. It's not that deep compared to most fighting games, although it's one of the more deep arena fighters that I've personally played. But the appeal of that is and has always been it's Dragon Ball, and it's got like every character you could ever think of. So if you're a big fan of Dragon Ball, you should absolutely check that out. I got the collector's edition that came with a statue of Goku and Broly. That's awesome, and I highly recommend it. As for Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, I bought that game because I'm a massive Prince of Persia fan. I have played the Sands of Time over and over and over and over again, probably at least 20 times in my life. I really love that game and all the other games in that trilogy. So when they decided to make a new game in the franchise, I decided I'm going to go ahead and check it out. And I also love Metroidvania games, so that's what this is. And it is a really interesting take on the genre. It has really fancy features like being able to pin screenshots on the map, so that if you remark somewhere that you know you need to go back to with some later power that you don't know, you can look at the screenshot so you can remember what did I need at that spot without having to go back there every time you get a new power and you don't remember what you had marked. It's really nice. The game is really good. The story is pretty decent for a Metroidvania game that's not super long. The boss fights are really good. I really like the powers, and there's some really cool hidden areas on the map, and it's a great experience even just to platinum. I didn't platinum this game. I play most of my games on PlayStation, but I plan to go back and finish it at some point. I just need to go get the collectibles. With that being said, we're going to jump into number 5 on my top 5 best games of the year list, and we're going to start off with Persona 3 Persona 3 Reload. I really love this game. I really love the original Persona 3, which I played on my PSP as Persona 3 Portable as my first experience with the game. And this is a great new introduction to the game for anyone that was a massive fan of Persona 5, as the series, of course, picked up a lot of new players with that game. Persona 3 has quite possibly the strongest story out of 3, 4, and 5, and it has incredible music, which they recorded a ton more for the Reload version of the game. It's all excellent. I even bought the vinyl of the music so I can listen to it at home. The fantastic UI of Persona 5 has been imported into this game with, of course, its own unique spin. It looks beautiful. It sounds amazing. It's a great RPG story. And, of course, any RPG like this, it's like 80 plus hours long. So you really get your money's worth out of the game. I highly, highly recommend anybody that loves turn-based RPGs like this, check out Persona 3 Reload, especially if you have not tried Persona 5 yet. This game will blow you away, and it will bring you into the series like any of them will. All right, number 4, and I don't have the physical copy of this, is going to be Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade really surprised me this year. I ended up picking it up digitally shortly after it came out because I saw all the reviews and all the gameplay that people were posting, and of course during the trailers I thought, okay, I kind of get why people are interested in this game. But the gameplay of Stellar Blade is actually a fantastic parry-based system that's a lot of fun. The bosses are crazy, especially some of the endgame bosses, and it has some replayability with 2 branching paths. There's actually 3 different endings, and you need to do all of them in order to get the platinum trophy, although it's pretty easy to save scum it to get 2 of them because the change only happens at the end for 2 of the different endings. Either way, it's a fantastic game. Anybody that's interested in any kind of Souls-like combat almost, but more action-packed, faster, maybe Sekiro is a better comparison, you should absolutely check out Stellar Blade. It's the perfect length for that kind of game. There's a lot of things you can do. You can fish, you can complete side missions, there's lots of things on the map to discover, there's even a little bit of platforming. It's a great game, and you should absolutely check it out. That's going to be number 4 for me. Alright, coming in at number 3 on the year, and I don't have the box right now because someone is borrowing it, but for number 3, I'm going to put the Game of the Year award winner at the Game Awards, Astro Bot. I really enjoyed Astro's Playroom, and this is basically just what if we took Astro's Playroom and we made it about a 20-hour game instead of a 4 or 5 hour experience. All of the bots are great to see. Some of their choices blew me away. I never expected to see things like Vib Ribbon, for instance, be represented in a game. This is truly a great celebration of all of the video games of PlayStation's past, and it's an excellent game. It really focuses on gameplay. This is not filled with cutscenes. This is not one of PlayStation's classic movie games. Astro Bot is a video game, and it is a ton of fun for all ages. Anybody can complete it. Maybe some of the harder challenges a younger kid wouldn't be able to do, but anybody will have fun with it. It's like Mario of PlayStation. It is fantastic, and I expect that series to continue. Good job, Team Asobi. All right, and then coming in at number 2 on the list for me is going to be Metaphor Refantazio. This is the collector's edition box. It has the steelbook in it and a map of the area and all kinds of stuff. I got this because I knew I was going to love this game. It's by the makers of the Persona series, as they say in pretty much every single ad that they had for the game, and it uses their signature UI, this time, slightly different for Metaphor. And this is a really interesting fusion of action RPG plus classic JRPG. So you start out on the field and you can attack enemies to lower their stagger bar, basically. And if you start combat after that, you start combat with a little bit of extra damage and the enemy's stunned. And the game does not pull any punches. This game is much more difficult than the Persona games. It uses the Shin Megami Tensei series' press turn system rather than the one more system in Persona, and that really makes a huge difference in terms of how difficult it can be and how strong the enemies are allowed to be. So what that ends up meaning is that you really want to start combat on your terms rather than getting ambushed. That is much more punishing than it is in a Persona game. And because it's kind of action combat, it's also much easier for that to happen than it is in Persona. So you have to be very careful. Even the basic enemies can trip you up and start an ambush on you. They introduce a lot of new things for this game. So instead of having personas, you have something called archetypes, which is basically a class which you cannot change in combat. You can only change out of combat. And this makes you, at least at first, much weaker than I think you are at the beginning of Persona games. Although because of the way the system works, where you can mix and match abilities from any archetype that you have unlocked, and all characters can unlock all archetypes, you can actually become far stronger in Metaphor than you can in any Persona game. I mean, granted, maybe removing things like ultimate abilities or some of the crazy things you can do in the end game of a SMT game with like several new game pluses, for instance. I'm talking in one single playthrough, you can become an unbelievable god of the battlefield. Now, with that being said, that does take a lot of grinding to do, and if you just play it normally and don't try to do that, I think the game is balanced around being a relatively difficult experience. I had a bit of a rough time with the final boss, and I know some of my friends did not, but those were people that spent a lot more time building up their archetypes than I did. So if you're one of those people that likes to blitz a game and get through all of the main story content as fast as possible, you're going to have a difficult time in Metaphor, especially over people that love to do all of the side content. I did all of the side content, and I still felt a little bit weak at the end because I didn't really focus on how to build up my archetypes and make myself as strong as possible. But either way, the story is amazing. It's perfectly in time for election season in the United States, so the fact that it came out when it did is actually hilarious. This is about a kingdom struggling to figure out their next king, and they're going to go through a sort of election type system. If you check it out, you'll be really interested. The story goes places you would never expect, and the voice acting in this game is mostly good, but absolutely incredible for some characters. Stroll, Heisme, and Luis, who's the main villain throughout most of the game, absolutely fantastic. Their performances are incredible, and you will find yourself at the edge of your seat every time Luis comes onto the screen to see what he's going to say and how he's going to say it. Check out Metaphor Refantazio if you even a little bit like turn-based RPGs. Just a little bit. Persona 3 Reload is obviously super involved. If you have to be a huge JRPG fan to be able to get into that game. You really have to like what that kind of game represents. But Metaphor, if you even can mildly enjoy turn-based combat, play that game. You will not regret it. All right, then after that glowing review, what could possibly take my number one spot? For me, that's actually going to be a game that came out really early in the year. That's going to be Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I got the extra edition that came with the art book, which is really beautiful. I'm not going to show a whole lot, but the art is really amazing in this game. And as well as the music being done by, of course, legendary Final Fantasy composers. I am somebody that has not played the original Final Fantasy VII. I have only played the remake games. Of course, being around gaming for so long, I do know most of the story of Final Fantasy VII. We've all seen it. Sephiroth, Aerith, Tifa, etc. We know these characters. We know mostly more or less what they've been through. But the turns of the story are somewhat new. There's different setup for some things, new events that happen in this remake game. And more importantly, this combat system is incredible. They took the FF7 remake combat system where you could have 3 characters on the field, switch between them, build up ATB for different moves, and then a stagger system, and they took that to 11. You now have different synergy moves that you can do with your characters that are basically like super moves that really take your damage over the top, so you can really punish enemies with them once you stagger them, and they're all fantastic. There's one for every single combination of characters, so no matter who you decide to use in your party, and there are a lot of characters to choose from here, you will always have something crazy that you can do, on top of the fact that each one has 2 different regular synergy moves that you can do together to help build up their synergy bar in order to do these ultimate synergy moves. And they all do different things for different situations. You can hit enemies with a big hit. You can shoot out a projectile. Lots of different things that you can do. Those are just some of the ones I remember off the top of my head. And it allows you to really feel invested in not just the characters like you normally would throughout a long story like this, but also the characters in the team that you choose. You can feel like the characters that you want to play as most of the time, although you can't take Cloud out of your party, are really more... You could feel like they're more together than you normally would be able to out of just choosing the characters in the party that you want to use, because their synergy moves are... They're going to feel more specific to you. On top of this, the graphics are absolutely amazing. Of course, it's only available on PS5, but that's soon to change in January with the PC version. Anybody that played FF7 Remake, you need to check out FF7 Rebirth. Even if you didn't like the combat of FF7 Remake, if you like FF7, you should check it out. One of my friends loves FF7, the original, but does not like FF7 Remake, and he still played a lot of Rebirth. I'm not 100% sure if he finished it, but he played a lot of it. And that's a lot coming from him because he likes to jump around between a bunch of different games. The performances in FF7 Rebirth are also absolutely incredible. Everybody that I've seen that has played FF7 Rebirth has come away with it with Barrett as either their favorite character like me or one of their favorite characters. The performance as Barrett was incredible. If I got to do the Game Awards this year, instead of Aerith being nominated, even though I think her performance was great, I would have put Barrett in that slot and I would have picked him to win. It was amazing. It made him an unforgettable character and one that I really want to see more from, when in FF7 Remake he was just kind of the tough guy character and he didn't have that much going for him, at least for me. So that's going to do it for my top 5 best games of the year 2024. And in the middle, before we get to the worst games of the year, I want to talk about a couple games that are more on brand with how this channel usually operates. So now we're going to talk about 5 games that I think are overlooked or forgotten, which is what this channel is generally about. If you're new here, welcome to Abandoned Save. I like to talk about games that are forgotten or generally not as well known as I think they should be, games that were good but didn't really get that legendary status to help them survive the test of time. You can see things like Spy Hunter and Ninja Blade on this channel, and I hope you'll stick around to see some more. With that being said, here's 5 games that I think are relatively overlooked and deserve to be talked about more than they have been, and are actually good candidates for videos of mine in the future. So just real quick, the first 3 that I want to talk about are all League of Legends games. And yes, I know, haha, League of Legends. Okay, we all know the reputation that it has. Until very recently, with all of the layoffs going around in the gaming industry, Riot had a studio called Riot Forge, which was there to make games for other people. Now, none of these games ever really picked up too much interest, and I think that's part of why it was affected by the layoffs, and now, unfortunately, this studio called Riot Forge does not exist anymore. But basically what they would do is contract out indie studios to make pretty much versions of the games that they were popular for them with League of Legends characters. There are a few of these, but there are 3 specifically that I want to talk about that I played throughout 2024 and were amazing games. And that's going to be Ruin King, Convergence, and Mageseeker. So all 3 of these games focus on different characters, and they all play completely differently. So I'm going to start out with Ruin King. Ruin King is an RPG where you can play as one of, I think, 5 different characters. Don't remember quite how many there were. It has a really interesting system where you choose your action, and your action gets put out on a lane, like League of Legends has lanes in it. And you can choose whether you want it to be a power attack or a speed attack, which will make them do more or less, but change how fast they come out. And then on those lanes, which you can always see at the bottom of the screen when you're choosing your actions, can be different effects like buffs or things that hurt you. So you have to plan your moves around not only what you want to do, but where you want that to end up, so that they can get some kind of extra buff, or if you need to make sure you move before the enemy does because they're going to do something you need to stop. It's a really interesting system for an RPG, and I really enjoyed it. The story is good, the acting is pretty good, and it has some of the most popular characters in League of Legends, like Ahri and Yasuo in it. So these are things that are definitely worth checking out. If you liked Arcane and you want to check out something else, if you like RPGs, this is the one to go for. Otherwise, let's say you like Metroidvania games, and you're especially a really big fan of Echo in Arcane. Well, they made an Echo video game as well, which is a Metroidvania game called Convergence. And in that game, you can use his Z drive to rewind time a little bit, almost like Prince of Persia. It's a 2D style game like the Prince of Persia game that I talked about earlier. It's relatively short. I want to say it took me maybe like 12 hours or something to finish it. And the game has a lot going on, lots of cool powers. The story is pretty good. I really enjoyed it. And so I highly recommend Convergence for anybody that likes Metroidvanias. And then finally, the last one, the Mageseeker, is your old school kind of beat 'em up game. And this one is featuring Silas and Lux. Lux being one of the most popular characters in League of Legends. Sylas is pretty popular as well, and Sylas has the ability to steal people's powers and then use them against them. So in that game, when you fight enemies, you can steal their powers, of course, and use them against them. And it's a lot of fun, relatively short game. None of these games came out at full price, so you can always find them for around $30, I think, at full price, and less if they go on sale. Especially if one of these games goes on sale and you want to see more about the League of Legends universe or like this kind of game, go check them out. Next one I want to talk about is Ghost Trick the Phantom Detective. This is a Capcom DS game that they decided to remake and put out on the PS4. I played it on the PS5. And this game is a puzzle game where at the start of the game, this is not a spoiler, your character dies, and now you are tasked as a ghost with figuring out how you died and maybe being able to prevent it, because there are different ways that you can move around in time as well. So you meet a bunch of crazy characters, move around all over the place. There's a lot of fun things you can do. The story is wild, and it features a really cute dog named Rocket. It's a lot of fun. If you like puzzle games, this is the one for you. And then finally, I have to throw in a rhythm game here because I'm a huge Guitar Hero Rock Band fan. I love rhythm games, and one of my friends let me know about a rhythm game that was on sale for like $3 on the PlayStation Store. I'm sure it will be on sale at some point again for around that price, and that is Rhythm Sprout. Rhythm Sprout is a really cute game. It's really easy to control, but it gets extremely difficult. This is not for the rhythm game fan that's brand new. Okay, this is a rhythm game fan's rhythm game. And getting the highest rating on enough of the levels in order to get the Platinum Trophy took me many hours. It was extremely difficult, but it's a lot of fun most of the time. This game also has a story that is really funny. Well, at times. Sometimes it doesn't quite hit the mark, but that's comedy for you. If you're looking to get into a rhythm game and you only want to spend a couple dollars, this is perfect for you. The songs are maybe not as great as some other rhythm games, especially with original songs in them, but I think the humor of the game really makes up for that, being able to dress yourself up in silly outfits and have silly weapons and the crazy things that the characters say. It's not super long, and it really is challenging, and the challenge of it is a lot of fun to master. All right, and now we're here, the top 5 worst games of the year 2024. And I want to preface this by saying these are games that I played this year. Some of them did not come out this year. I didn't play enough bad games that I felt deserved to be on a worst list in order to do this, but I looked at just all of the games that I played this year, and so that's what I came up with for this. We're going to start with a dishonorable mention real quick too, and that's going to be Dragon Ball The Breakers. Obviously, I love Dragon Ball. I talked about how I got the collector's edition of Sparking Zero, and I've put like 20-something hours into that game. That game is amazing. Dragon Ball The Breakers is not. I can understand the idea. The concept actually isn't that bad. What if we took Dead by Daylight, and instead of going around getting generators, we did something else? They went with the time machine from Trunks. And instead of monsters, we had the iconic Dragon Ball villains. The only problem is you can't just fight the villains, right? That would be too easy. That doesn't work for Dead by Daylight. So what do? Well, they make you a person that can briefly transform into some of the characters in order to fight them a little bit. And it just doesn't work. They did add something later to make it so that you could transform into characters like Gogeta, from the Broly movie, and some other characters that are actually strong, and it lasts for much longer than the quick transformations that you have. And that lets you take the fight to the character or to the person playing the villain. The only problem is that's the only fun part of the game. It just doesn't work. And it controls badly because that's not really what it was meant for. Now, I'm not a person that likes Dead by Daylight anyway, so I really wasn't the target audience for this game, but I was the target audience for this game, and then I'm a huge Dragon Ball fan. So it just didn't hit the mark for me. I would skip this one. The player base is very small at this point, and it only works with a player base, but it's not that bad, so it's not going to quite make my list. Okay, so number 5 worst game of the year, and this one might be a little bit controversial. I am going to go with the Plucky Squire. Now, this game does not make the list because it was a terrible game. Okay, that's why it's all the way down at number 5. But the reason that I have this here is that it was extremely buggy when I played it on launch, causing me to have to restart it multiple times, including one section where I lost significant progress at a part that I thought was particularly unfun, so I had to redo it all. So that really hurt my impression of the game. And then the other thing is that while this game concept is fantastic, which is what drew me to play the game in the first place, the execution of this is not perfect. There are multiple instances where it felt like they forgot about their own mechanics, and when they do bring them in, some of them feel very underbaked. They are more interested in making a mini game collection at times of what if we did this for a gameplay section, what if we did this, than they are with truly improving on the concept that they introduced to you at the very start of the game. So it doesn't get super deep. I understand that this is mostly a kids game, but kids can understand and figure out puzzles, okay? They didn't need to make the game super simple for the entire duration of the game. There are a few puzzles that you need to do for trophies that are a little bit more complicated, but I don't think I needed a guide for any of them. If I did, it was maybe one or two. The game is worth playing, but just keep in mind, hopefully they've fixed the bugs by now. It's been a few months, but it was a little bit rough going, and it doesn't really evolve past the beginning of the game. It is the same game through the whole way through. Okay, number 4 on the list. Now, I want to be fair to indie games. Not all indie games are going to be great, and they don't have the budget to do some of the things that they want to do. But one of my friends convinced me to play this indie game this year, and that is going to be the Greyhill Incident. The Greyhill Incident is obviously from the title here, a alien game. It's I think period piece from like the 90s or something. I don't quite remember, but I think it was. And it involves an active alien abduction happening in a town, and you need to find your way out and escape. And so it plays kind of like a escape room kind of game. It's kind of like a puzzle game. You can fight the aliens a little bit, which is absolutely ridiculous, by the way. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really have enough to justify costing as much as it does. You could probably get it at this point for relatively cheap, but unless you're the biggest alien abduction fan in the world and you love that kind of stuff, this is one to skip. I know most people have probably never even heard of it anyway, but there's a reason for that. I did play it this year, so it's on the list, but it's very forgettable. Okay, number 3, similarly in that vein, so once again, it's not going to be much higher than 3, is going to be the Chant. Now, the Chant is another indie game that is basically trying to emulate Resident Evil, but instead of doing zombies, we're instead doing anxiety demons, I guess. I don't really know what to even call what's going on in that game. You go to a cult, and you can't really choose what your character does, but you can kind of choose what they say. It has a few different endings, but if you get to the end of this game, you're not going to find yourself wanting to even know what happens in the other endings. Also, I don't even think there's that happy of an ending in this game throughout all of them. It's a wild game. It never does anything that interesting. It has some free DLC that's actually a lot more fun than the base game, but it's not really worth checking out. There are tons of Resident Evil clones out there, and this is not one of the best of them. It feels like Diet Coke instead of Coke Zero. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone else, but I think Diet Coke is absolutely disgusting, and Coke Zero is just fine, and they're basically the same thing. This is that of Resident Evil games. It just misses the mark on too many levels in order to be any kind of fun. All right, number 2 and number 1 are not going to be games from this year, but like I said, I didn't have enough bad games this year to make a list like this. So I did play these games for the first time this year. Number 2 is going to be Gotham Knights. Now, this game has a lot going for it. Okay, the graphics are great. The controls are fantastic, and there's a lot of places where it shows that they had the foresight to think about it and had time to really work on the game. There are things that track super well in the overworld. If you play in co-op with somebody, you can go back to your world and then have all that progress carry over, or not if you don't want it to and you want to do it all by yourself. You have all kinds of different characters showing up outside of just the main enemies of the game. There are other side stories with some of the other famous Batman villains. And of course, Batman isn't a huge character in this game. This is supposed to be after kind of the death of Batman, and this is why these 4 characters are taking over for him. The only problem is these characters are, in my opinion, written rather poorly. They are kind of stupid caricatures of what each individual is. So you have Robin, who's like the young nerd. You have Batwoman as the tech guru. The Red Hood is just a hulking mass kind of guy that always wants violence. And you have Nightwing, who he doesn't even really have that much of a personality. That's who I played. He doesn't do anything interesting, and his abilities are just not that good either, I don't think. At least from what I played of the other characters and saw the other characters. They all have something they can do, and his is kind of a support role, but it's not very good at supporting, so I don't know what they were going for with Nightwing. It just doesn't work. And the combat in this game boils down to basically push square to attack at your leisure. You don't really have to mash it or time it appropriately like you do in the Batman Arkham games. You get a bonus if you do, but it doesn't matter. You're going to become so overpowered for the enemies that it doesn't make a difference anyways. And you have to fight so many enemies, even in just the regular play, not just going for the platinum. You have to fight so many enemies that don't have enough variety that you're not even going to care. And if you increase the difficulty, all they're going to do is hit you harder and take longer to die, and they already take long enough, especially the big enemies. They have so much health and they're not fun to fight. You just have to hold square instead of push it every now and then, so that you'll do like an armor break and then go back to pushing square whenever you feel like it. And you have some powers that take a basically mana bar, and yeah, they'll help you kill the enemies, but you push them when they're up. That there's no thought. You use whichever one is the best one. There's no individual ability cooldown. It's just the cost. So you're probably going to pick one ability that's the best and just use it over and over and over again. That's the game. The story is also not good at all. They didn't know what they were doing with it, I don't think. There's multiple points where the game just says, okay, now just go do some random crimes for a while, and that's how you advance the plot. That's not interesting, especially when you're going to be doing that all the time anyways to get upgrades and levels. And then they had the audacity to include a trophy for New Game Plus, where you have to reach a certain level, and you can only do that in New Game Plus. So after you've done a million fights with a million different enemies, you have to go and do it again. And the best way to level up is just to do random crimes. So you're going to just put it on easy and then run through a bunch of crimes until you hit the level that you need. It's a terrible trophy. The game just doesn't ever deliver on any of the highs that it looked like it could in the trailer or that were in any of the Arkham games. I don't know how this ended up happening. They just did not deliver at all. It is not fun to play, and I would not recommend it. I got it for free from PlayStation Plus, and I feel like I still spent too much on it just by playing it long enough to get the platinum. But I did it because I wanted to play co-op with a friend. That is the only benefit this game has. If it did not play co-op, I don't think anybody would have gotten the platinum in this game besides the absolute diehard Batman fans. It just isn't worth it. But all of that still makes Gotham Knights a solid 4 out of 10 game, where 5 is average. The next game, the worst game I played in 2024, which I got the platinum trophy in because I'm an idiot that's obsessed with stupid platinum trophies that don't do anything, is not a 4 out of 10 game. It does not almost reach the mark of average. It is terrible from start to end, and I played it all the way through anyways. And that is going to be Immortals of Aveum. Now, EA went in hard on this game. They spent a lot of money on it. You could tell in the way the graphics work. They used a lot of the power of the new consoles to make it so that there were particle effects everywhere and make it look as beautiful as possible. But here's the problem. It's terrible. It has no redeeming value whatsoever. You have 3 different powers, and you're supposed to be a mage, right? It's all about magic society, and the world is kind of ending. There's a big boss enemy, and they don't know what exactly is causing that, and the mage people are in charge, and the evil enemy is like subjugating people, and you start out as one of the towns that is getting taken over by him, but you manage to escape. So what the powers really boil down to is guns. This is a first-person shooter. They tried to say as much as they could that it's not a first-person shooter, that this is a magic game. It's magic, not guns. But no, it is 3 guns. It is the blue gun, the red gun, and the green gun. You cannot tell me otherwise. That is exactly what they are. There are slightly different versions of each because you have, of course, an equipment screen with the stupid circle like from Destiny that you have to move around instead of being able to pick out of a list. I hate those, by the way. And each one of those different guns can change a little bit. So you can have the green gun, which is like the machine gun version. It shoots a lot fast. You can have it be slightly homing, or you can have it just kind of shoot in a spray that is completely terrible and useless. I have no idea why you would ever want it to do that. And they have various amounts of ammo before they have to reload. Yes, reload. You're reloading magic. That makes perfect sense, I know. And then the blue one is like a sniper, and the red one is a shotgun. And that's exactly what they are. They follow the rules of FPS game, sniper, shotgun, and machine gun with big to small ammo capacity before you have to reload, and how much damage they do. Now, the only problem is, as well, the blue gun is far superior to everything else, just bar none. There's no argument there to be had. You can do extra damage with the blue gun if you hit an enemy's weakness, which in general is their head. You're going to be fighting mostly enemies that have a head. And there is very little, almost no recoil on these shots, at least on controller. So what you end up doing is picking the blue gun, because why would you choose anything else, even though you have access to all 3 all at once, aiming at the head of an enemy and mashing the trigger as fast as you can and watching them all die. I was doing this on the hardest difficulty in order to get the platinum, and that still worked for the entire game. The only time you have to change weapons is sometimes enemies have a shield with the corresponding color, so you need to use that weapon, and then once the shield is gone, you go back to blue and you go back to doing the same exact thing you were doing for every other enemy. There's no reason not to do it. They do have superpowers in the game that you can charge up, which are different, and you can equip different ones. I ended up finding one really early on that's basically just a Kamehameha, and that was the coolest one for me, and I kept using it. I don't care if there were better ones. I kept using that one because I liked it, and it was one of the only things that I thought was actually cool about the game. Now, all of that being said, that's not even why this game ends up number 1. Remember when I was talking about all the beautiful graphics and particle effects? Well, EA went overboard. The game can't handle it. I was playing on PS5, and the game is lagging in every big fight because there's too much going on. Now, I know that the PS5 is not as powerful as some PCs on the market right now, but most people playing on PC don't have superpowered PCs like that either. The console should be a high bar relatively for the average player, and it still can't handle it. There's too much going on. There's too many particle effects, and none of it is interesting enough to make you care anyway. And we're still not done, because this game's story is also terrible. It's inexcusably bad. The main character is disgusting. He is not likable in the least bit. You get the ability to make some choices throughout the game, mostly in terms of who you want to talk to and what you want to say, but when it comes down to it, the game is going to play out the same way no matter what happens. And the most critical point of the story, where Basically, the main character, I'm going to spoil this, I don't give a fuck. This game sucks, don't play it. The main character has the choice to either take the magical MacGuffin that gives the bad guy his powers and destroy it, or take it with him and try to use it to control what the bad guy is trying to use it for, and try and save the world that way. And everyone and their mother is like, hey, you got to go in there and destroy it. That's the mission. And because of super stupid reasons, he's the only one that can do it. So, okay, he goes in there alone. He gets to the MacGuffin. And what does he do? Do you get a choice? No, you do not get a choice. This is the most obvious point to make a branching path. It's near the end of the game anyway. You could have had two different things happen. No choice. You are going to watch as your character, who's like, I don't know, a 19, 20-year-old man, make the dumbest 19, 20-year-old man choice possible and take it in order to try and control the power of the enemies and lie to everyone and tell them all that he destroyed it until it becomes a massive problem. Of course, for the story, it all works out in the end, right? It has to. But he is insufferable. It is the stupidest choice he could have made, and you have to sit there and watch him make it. Like, flawed characters are a good thing, but Callum, or whatever his name is not flawed. He's fucking annoying. He's like a child, except he's an adult age. It's really frustrating. He annoys me in every conversation with the things that he says and who he chooses to interact with nicely versus be more mean to, which is not really up to you. Everybody just kind of forgives him anyways, even though he really should have, if it wasn't a video game and had to end happy, he really should have doomed the entire world with the shit he pulled. He is horrible. The story doesn't end properly anyways because they probably thought they were going to get sequels. There's no sequels that are ever coming for this piece of shit. And the gameplay itself is boring. It does not get more interesting. Once you have all the guns and the superpowers, that's the whole game. Enemies are magical beings, but yet they all play out exactly the same as a first-person shooter. Shoot them in the head and then you win. What was the biggest complaint of Doom Eternal? Having to use certain guns for certain enemies and causing you to juggle guns in a way that didn't feel natural to you. Well, guess what you're going to be doing with the shields in Immortals of Aveum? You're not going to be allowed to use the gun that you want to use, aka the blue gun, because you got to switch to green or red in order to deal with a shield. And if you have to deal with a red shield on enemies that are super aggressive, like there is in one particular part in the game, good fucking luck, because most of the shotguns that you're going to find are going to have 1 or 2 shots before you have to reload, and they're going to be super aggressive the entire time you're doing that, and it sucks. I hate this game. Immortals of Aveum is terrible. It has no redeeming factors. It is by far the worst game of 2024. I don't want to see anybody playing it or getting the stupid ass platinum that I did. Don't do it. It's a waste of time. All right, and that is going to do it for my top 5 best and worst games of 2024. It is holiday season, so I needed to get something out that was a little bit faster than normal, but I will be back to normal with a regular video in a couple weeks. We're going to be looking at another Xbox 360 game, and this one is not going to have a fancy name like FromSoft like the last one did, but I assure you it's a fun game that's absolutely worth remembering, and it got lost in time completely. With that being said, I'm Abandoned Save. Please like the video or subscribe if you're interested in seeing that, and I'll see you all next time.